Well, following his trip to Poland today, Rishi Sunak is meeting his German counterpart, Olaf Scholz. They'll discuss a new defence partnership between the two countries, following the Prime Minister's major defence spending announcements yesterday. Well, the former Defence Secretary Liam Fox able to join me now. Great to have you with us. Mr. Fox, what's your take on this boost in spending? Too little, too late? Great news? Break it down for us.
I think a number of us have been lobbying for this privately for some time, saying that given the level of risk that is out there in the world at the present time, given the amount of equipment we've given to Ukraine and the need to restock in the UK, that we needed to increase our defence spending. So it's very welcome. Of course, we already had seen under the current government, defence rise to 50 billion a year, which is a record, and of course makes us, after the United States, the biggest spender in NATO. But there clearly was a need for additional funding, and it's very, very welcome that we'll see another 75 billion over the next 6 years.
The sterling term 75 billion has been banned around. It's a bit misleading because it would imply that we wouldn't have matched inflation increases. The relative to GDP factor, I think, is more relevant, and trying to get to 2.5%, I guess, is the new pledge. What would it take, though, realistically, to actually be on a war footing in terms of percentage of GDP spend and time?
Well, first of all, I think you've got to be careful about the percentage GDP target. What defence needs is predictability. A lot of these programmes take a long time to get them properly into place. Therefore, they need to know that the actual financial funding will be there. Therefore, getting the 75 billion over 6 years is very clear that we are able to do the restocking. As I said, we get better procurement in that. And it's very important that as a country, we don't start to get into some of the unnecessary nitpicking, because there's an important element of deterrence here. It's important that those who would threaten the United Kingdom, whether that's the Iranians or the Russians or the Chinese, understand that we have a commitment to improving not only our own spending in the United Kingdom, but our commitment to NATO. And it's that collective NATO deterrence which is extremely important, particularly when you've got regimes like Putin and the Iranians at the present time. So I think that what we need to focus on is what are we going to be spending this on, and how are we going to get our European NATO partners to also increase their level of spending, so that we've got a proper range of equipment, not just traditional military equipment, but those capabilities in cyberspace and so on that actually will provide a proper deterrence and improve the security of our people.
Do you think the Prime Minister's trying to pressure Germany a little bit? The timing of when he's announced this boost in and around a visit to Germany?
Well, right back when I was Defence Secretary and Robert Gates was the American Defence Secretary, and probably before that, we were trying to encourage our NATO allies to increase their spending, and also to increase their spending not just on manpower, for example, but on capabilities, so that we've got a greater range that we can use within the alliance. And under the current German Chancellor, Germany has increased its defence spending already. If we can get an agreement amongst all our European NATO colleagues that they should be following us, then that would be terrific, because we can't always depend on the United States to be there for us. We need to, in Europe, be able to provide that European element of defence capability ourselves.
But we do rely entirely on the US, do we not, at the moment?
Not entirely, no. But we do mainly. The United States is the only country with an economy big enough and a defence budget big enough to provide full spectrum defence. Remember that the United States defence budget is bigger than the next 10 budgets in the world all combined. So it's bigger than Russia plus China plus Britain plus France and so on. It can provide full spectrum defence. I think the question is really within the European parts of NATO, what are we going to do so that together we can provide something like that full spectrum? European economies are not big enough to be able to provide all of that ourselves. So how do we work together and share that burden within NATO to be able to reassure the United States and American taxpayers that the Europeans are willing to shoulder the burden of their own defence?
Whether it was Grant Shapps or Ben Wallace, both were on the breakfast show this morning. There was quite a lot of discussion about it taking longer to deploy this extra spending in order to make sure it's deployed here and builds up our own industrial defence capacity. Where do you stand on the necessity of as much of this money as possible being spent domestically? Because I think it's fair to say the US defence industry has made huge advances over the rest of the world as well, not just the UK in recent decades. As long as it's a close ally, does it matter if the money is spent domestically or not?
Well, the defence industry in the UK provides more than 400,000 jobs. Maintaining that job security is good. And we also need to maintain sovereign capability in a number of areas. But we'll always also have to get value for money for the taxpayers. So there's always a judgment to be made about whether it's worth deploying money into new projects where that product already exists somewhere else. So that's a constant debate, let me tell you, that goes on inside the Ministry of Defence. It's a question of balance, but it's good that we've got some reassurance for the UK defence industry and for those who work within it.
Earlier today, we also heard the question posed of who the biggest threat is to Ben Wallace. His answer was very clear. I mean, who is the single biggest threat to the UK, and is it a clear and present threat, or is that stretching things a bit?
Well, there are a number of types of threat, aren't there? You've clearly got Putin's Russia attacking a sovereign democratic European state. That's a very clear threat to one of our allies and our values. You've got China, which is constantly trying to harvest information for the Chinese state. And you've got the Iranians, who have shown themselves to be utterly irresponsible, trying to destabilize their neighbors, exporting terrorism, and now trying to build nuclear weapons of their own. So it's not as simple as simply saying there is one enemy out there. And in fact, you can't have the luxury in security of saying there is only one enemy. If there's more than one, and there's more than one threat to the United Kingdom, they have to be dealt with simultaneously. I'm afraid that it's not discretionary spending, and it's not a choice of enemy.
Liam Fox, thanks so much for joining us.